My name's Jeff St Laurent. This is the Live Tuesday Call, coming back at you every week. And I'm excited about today's topic, how to keep and create long-term coaching clients. So just had a great conversation with the people that called in live. Thank you very much for those of you that call in live. And of course, those of you that listen to the recording. I do record all these calls. I post them every week in my university on my website, sellingcoaching.com. So if you can go ahead and check that out, sellingcoaching.com, right in the university. We've got a lot of great information there, got a search feature, so utilize that because you can get lost in information. So find out what's relevant for you, and that's where you can kind of get a start with the search and typing in some keywords there. Also on my website, right on the homepage of sellingcoaching.com, I have a great resource for you. It's the ultimate startup guide for coaches. I bribe you there with my dog, my cute yellow lab, who's like 12 and a half now. So he's still kicking and still rocking it, but I'm just kidding. I don't give away my dog, but it's a great resource. It's an audio and PDF resource for you. So when you do that, it also puts you on my email community, and that allows you to not only stay in touch with me, know what's going on with the weekly calls. I give some great education each week in my emails, but also from a coach's standpoint, I want you to pay attention to how I utilize that each and every week to stay in front of my audience and keep people engaged. And to nurture those relationships, because it's one thing to get people onto your email community, but then it's another thing to make sure we keep them engaged. So pay attention to that as well when you get on that. And at the top of my website, sellingcoaching.com, I have an invitation to my private Facebook group. Great group of coaches there, and that primarily is a great place for us to interact. And it's also an opportunity, a platform for you to begin to speak your message. As I work with a lot of coaches that are starting off, and I do a lot of stuff with video, because it's typically the scariest, but it's fantastic to get your message out there. But it's a great opportunity for you to start speaking your message, whether you've got it, nailed down or you're just starting to figure it out. We kind of utilize that for that communication and platform there. And then lastly, if you're in a position, like I talk to some people when they call in and throughout the week as well, online and face online is, they're in that place where, if you really do need some guidance, whether you've gone along the way and you're frustrated and you're tired of guessing and figuring it out on your own, or you're just starting off and you don't want to get to that point, consider working with me as your mentor coach. I get some group stuff and I do some one-on-ones as well. So I just say go to my website, sellingcoaching.com, go to the Work With Me page. I've got a form down the bottom of that page. If you fill that out, that'll come to me. I'll follow up with you and we can just create a relaxed conversation and see where we go from there. With all that being said, now you know how to kind of get in touch with me and stay in touch with me and take advantage of my resources, so forth and so on. Now let's provide you some great education. And like I said, today is how to create and keep long-term coaching clients. And it's kind of funny because one of the callers when we called in today, as they get an opportunity to ask questions and get a feel for what they want to hear on the call, he was like, well, don't we just have to be a great coach? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. We got to be a great coach. So this is not going to be a long me basically telling you how to be a great coach or just saying the same thing. Yes, absolutely. How do we keep clients happy, if you will, customers happy? Yeah, we want to service them, right? And so what I'll say with that is on that note is yes, that's an important aspect to it. And to go into it from the start there is I'll say this. How do we be a great coach? And I've been coaching full-time since 2004. And what I realized is when I came out of the coaching school that I went to and I started coaching, what I thought was being a great coach is different as to what I would come to understand as being a great coach. There's being a great coach from the level of, let's say, what we learn, let's say from a school or from some course or education that you took around coaching. There's the technical aspects of being a great coach, meaning, okay, well, I'm objective and I'm not judgmental and I don't have it in my own agenda. I hold their agenda, things like that. I ask open-ended questions, I listen on a deeper level type of thing, right? So those are like maybe some of the foundational, if you will, principles of being a great coach. Yes, that's a component to it. But what I've come to learn is being a great coach, what that means to me is consistently, session by session, understanding where the value is for that person right now. And of course, like I say, as I help coaches transition to full-time business, I always go back to the selling aspect, the skill set of selling. And I'll talk about this a little bit later today is when we talk about selling, when someone hires you in the first place, right? We understand where their need is, and then the timing of that need, and then of course if they're open or to at least considering or are considering, hiring someone like us to help them with that, right? But then it comes down to what they see in terms of value. How much value do they see in hiring us at that point, right? So that's that initial value. But when it comes to keeping them long term, I always look at it like this. Each and every session I have with a client, I want to make sure I understand where the value is for them today. In other words, I always know that people are always making a buying decision, even though they've already paid you. Let's say, hopefully they've paid you up front or close to that, maybe a couple payments or whatever. But either way, hopefully they've already paid you. But in my mindset, I'm thinking, where's the value for them today, right? So I never want to assume that, because when they come to you, when they hire you in the first place, obviously they're hiring you for a reason. They have a certain goal, they have certain objectives, they have certain, maybe they don't have any, they're hiring you because they need some clarity to figure out what they want to do, either with their life or a relationship or what have you, right? But either way, that's the objective. And so while we want to keep that as in the back of our minds is, okay, ultimately what we're going for, for me is, I want to help them transition to full time, right? However, each and every time they come to the call, the reality is people's lives are up and down and sideways and flipped around, and we don't know where they are. So I've had plenty of calls, especially even as a mentor coach now, as I'm helping these coaches transition to full-time business, where I'm not doing any mentor coaching at all or mentoring at all. It turns into a coaching session. Not necessarily I do it with permission, right? But sometimes they're like, you know what, I can't focus on my business right now because X, Y, and Z is happening, or my dad's dying, or something's going on in their world, or my son's in jail, and I'm just throwing some things that have happened. I can throw out many things, right? And it's we've got to recognize is where they are right now and what's going to be the most valuable for them right now. Even though let's say I'm helping them with their business and that mentoring side, if someone's struggling with a situation or just went through a divorce or a bad breakup type of thing, my job is to help them get to the spot where they can focus again on their business. Otherwise, they're not going to ever get there and be able to do their business, right? But I don't decide that. I want to find out, where is the value for them, and every call, I'll ask my clients, pretty much every call, so where are you at today? What do you feel you want to focus on, right? I know I'm going to guide you. I know I'm going to help you. I know where we left off, right? And I know these are some things we want to talk about. Typically, we'll have some email communication in between then. But either way, what would be the most valuable with your time today, And I want to see. And if it's off the course, I'll bring that up and I'll say, I know we were talking about X, Y, and Z. It sounds like this is a little bit different. If we took the time to focus on this, would that be helpful for you? Would you be happy if we did that? And yes, I'm getting permission with that. And so that's where that value is. And it comes, when I say how do we keep them long term, this is a phase of it. So when we say, okay, just be a great coach, this is what I feel what that means, so you can think about it from a deeper level of find the value for that person. Always find the value for that person. And when you do that each and every call, that's when there's going to be more value for them, especially as you come towards the end of, let's say, that first round of sessions. I always recommend, and I start off with 9 sessions, right? So as we get towards the end of that, we want to get to that place as we know we can work with them longer. We know the longer we work with someone, the more value it is for them, and the longer we work with them, the more we can help them, right? So now it's just a matter of being able to get to the point where we can create that so they can still see that value. Because the reality is that when people come to us initially, and this is what I've seen, and after working with hundreds of clients over the years, is when someone comes to you, they're in that place where, let's say things aren't as great as they want it to be, just as for sake of conversation, right? And they want to change something, they want to improve something. And then they're excited, right? And then they get to that spot of they're working with you, and they might go through an initial dip of they get some excitement and they kind of crash down a little bit because they actually got to do some work, but then they kind of level off. But then, things aren't as bad, or things start to move and things start to progress. People can settle in pretty quickly just in an average or good situation. So not only is our job to find out where the value is for them each time, but part of this is, I always like to say this, is when I'm with a client, I'm always, if I can use, I don't know if it's a movie term or a book term or whatever, but it's foreshadowing, right? It's kind of foreshadowing where we can go. So as I get a sense, I'm always getting a feel for where the client is.
And let's say we're going for X result. Let's kind of keep it general right now. Let's say we're going to go for X result. As I feel like I'm getting closer to X result, right, and things are starting to work out, they're getting some clarity, they're getting some momentum. It hasn't happened yet, right, but we're getting the sense that maybe the next call or the next couple of weeks or so, I'm going to get one of those calls where they're just like, oh my God, I'm on top of the world, right? I start foreshadowing and saying, hey, this is great, or I can definitely sense that you're starting to move forward. I can definitely sense, I can feel the clarity, I can feel the shift, etc. You know, the great part about this is where I start to foreshadow, if you will, say, you know, once you start getting closer to, or once we achieve X, right, once we figure out X, the great part is now we're going to be able to start to take a closer look at Y and Z, because that's going to get you even closer to where you want it to go with A, right? So I start to kind of paint that picture to kind of also remind them like, hey, your work's not done yet. But I don't want to say it in a way that's like, hey, don't get too excited about this because you got a whole lot of work in front of you, right? We don't want to be a downer, but we want to find the time to be able to kind of show them. It's like, oh, this is exciting. But in a way, I guess we're kind of saying it like, well, don't get too excited, but we want to, you know, empower them and keep them on that momentum. But I also want to plant that seed and say, hey, this is great because once we get that, now we can start looking at this, right, and show them how it falls into a bigger picture. I'm like, this is great because now you're one step closer. Now we're starting to make some progress. Now that you've got, you know, this relationship figured out, et cetera, now we're going to be stronger each day so we can stay more focused when it comes time to doing your work. Right, and so then we can start focusing on these types of strategies. Then we can start focusing on this, right? So it's a constant up-leveling of them, and so it's really important that I found as a coach is that's where we've got to step in as a coach and start asking questions beyond the result, beyond the clarity, as we start getting closer to, and just a little bit before that happens, right? We don't want to take away from the actual execution of it and the actual, you know, celebration of it. So obviously as they get there and things like that, yeah, we want to celebrate. We want to, you know, congratulations, this is so exciting. But always we want to start to prepare them for, hey, what's next? And a lot of the times, you know, it's either asking those questions, it's making sure that you understand where that can go. Sometimes it's putting that together on your own and not necessarily assuming that this is where they want to go afterwards. But it's a lot of times I found that you can see where they want to go just from the conversations and listening to them over the time. So those are important pieces right there that I want you to really be thinking about is starting to suggest and starting to say, like, you know, here's where we can go from there. Or, you know, as you get closer to this, I want you to start thinking about where we go next, right? So, you know, we're getting close to doing this, and that's fantastic. But I also know there's a bigger piece to you. And it's not assuming, right? It's knowing them as a person. You know, it's knowing them, because when you really listen to someone, you know where they value, what they want to go, where their real interests are. You know, and part of being a great coach is, and part of why people see value in coaches, where they can see value in you, is you can push them, but you can push them differently than other people in their lives try and push them, right? Because we're not telling them what to do, but it's like, I've got a feeling that once we accomplish this, or once we, get clarity on this, that's just going to be only the beginning for you. Like, that's only going to set you up now to move forward and comes next. So while I don't want you to stop your progress here, I do want you to be starting to think about in the back of your head, like, okay, once I get this clarity, or once I achieve this, or once this is over, where am I going to go? It's kind of like the moon, like people going to the moon when they would travel to the moon. Before they really understood that, you spend years, right, planning this trip to the moon. You go to the moon, you come back, and it's just like, now what? Like, okay, I go into this depression, right? But now it's like when astronauts, if they go to the moon anymore, or space travel, but the bottom line is when they go to a big mission is they're starting to plan, hey, what's coming up next when I come home? Hey, I'm going to take a couple-week vacation or some time off, but when that's done, where am I going? What am I doing? They're going to figure that out so they have something in front of them, right? So, and that's our job, is to be able to start to understand that. And this starts to lead to creating those long-term clients, because we're building the value for what we do each and every session. We're also building the value for what we do in terms of by pushing them and by showing them that there's more. Things as I get closer to the end of the sessions with them, number one, even as I just used that word, I caught myself saying that, the end of the sessions, We want to be really careful of our language. I'm going to get into the language in just a little bit when we present our package at if you will, point of sale or at the end of the complimentary session. We want to be cognizant of our language and not use words like I just said, like end, if you will. But as we get closer to, I'll say it like this, the 9th session, right? As we get closer to those sessions, we want to start to be aware, and I'll start to prep my clients and say, hey, you know, we've got a few more sessions of the original 9 that we started with. So listen to my language, right? And I might say it differently a few different times here and there, right? But we've got a few more sessions left of the original 9 sessions we started with. So I want you to start to be thinking about, as we come closer to that, you know, where the value is for me and for you continuing on as we continue our work together, right? So I don't like necessarily assume it, but I want to kind of plant that seed and saying, like, because when I start to look at where you're at, like I see, like, yeah, we've made some great progress. I also know there's a lot more I feel like we have to do together, you know. But then I'll also say, it's like, but I want to know where you're at. So you don't have to answer me now, but I want you to start thinking about that. So as we get towards our 9th session, we know where we're going from there, right? So see, the language that I'm using is I want to set that person up because I want them to know, like, I don't want to be done with you. And I'm very straightforward in telling them that, you know. I'm not going to lie. I mean, when some people get towards that 9th session, or whatever packages that you have, right? But I'm just using that because that's what I recommend. You know, when they get to that 9th session, you should know some people are done. They're done. Like, you're not trying to force anything, but you're going to know the people that, like, our work is so not done together, right? And yes, it's more money. Yes, it's more of a commitment. But remember, it's never about that. I always go back to the selling. It's all about the value. It's all about the value for somebody. If someone sees value in working with you, they're going to continue to work with you. But just know this. Just like I teach with people in hiring you, they're just not going to jump out of the woodwork and hire you. They're not just going to just raise their hand and be like, oh, my God, Jeff, I want to hire you. Not to say it doesn't ever happen, and people don't ever come to you and say, hey, I'm interested in, you know, learning more about your coaching, right? It can happen, but I never want to rely on that. Right? So we want to make sure that just even though they're already a client, we want to make sure we understand the value along the way. We want to make sure as we're getting close, we're doing these things so we can start to talk about this with them. We can start to talk about and let them know, you know, I see our work together continuing on after this because I feel like there's a lot for us left to do. And I'm excited. I always let people know I'm excited. And I don't, you know, some people I'm really excited to work with, and some people it's not like I'm not excited for it. But you can tell, like, they're at that spot where there's not a lot left to do, or they're at that spot where they really are content on their own. So I come from a genuine place, but when I'm excited to work with somebody, and I have a good client that, you know, there's a great relationship, like, I let them know, like, I'm excited to continue our work together, and I feel like there's a lot more work for us to do, but I don't know where you're at. But I'm letting you know, right? It's just like it's a relationship, right? It's like I'm letting you know that I want to continue our work together, whatever that might look like. But what I'm going to need from you is I'm going to need you to think about what it is that you're doing, where you're going, and how you see me contributing and be a part of that, and if there's value there. Because if there's value, let's figure out a way to continue on, right? So whatever they're bringing up, that if they start to talk about money or any commitments, et cetera, they don't know where they're at, just let them know where you stand, right? And that's an important component to this whole piece, is because it's, I mean, think about it for yourself, right? And if you were working with somebody, wouldn't it be that much better for you knowing that that person really wants to work with you and that they see that there's more work? And then creating that dialogue, let that person know. It's like in a relationship. Like if you're in a relationship, let the other person know you love them. Do it on a regular basis, right? And tell them, give them more reasons why. So if you see, you know, I see our work continuing on at this. I'm excited. I love working with you, and I see there's a lot of value from my angle of where we can go. And then give them details if you know it, because here's what I see. I see us working on X and Y, and then I see, because I know you mentioned to me when we started off, or I know you mentioned to me along the way that these are important for you. You know, and I feel like we've just spent the last 3 months or whatever it is setting up for that foundation. And it's like, oh my God, I know I want to see this through. I want to keep you accountable. I want to keep you on track. I want to push you because I know there's some challenging times along the way. You know, so give them, think about it. Think about why you want to work with them. So this is your work on your end as a coach, is let them know why you want to work with them and where you see the value is. And hopefully if you've been doing a great job, along the way and really seeing where their value is, all right, and knowing that stuff along the way, you should hopefully have a pretty good idea of what's important to them and where they're going, at this point after being, 2-3 months working with them. But that's your job, is to be able to figure that out and share that along the way, making sure that you're always, like I said, doing that foreshadowing and saying, here's what's coming next. Even as we get closer, I'm working at that 8th and that 9th session. I'm talking about the future. You think about a relationship, and whether you're married or you're still dating or wherever you're at in your life, but I, even like dating, it's like when I'm with my girlfriend, it's like I tell her, like, oh, next summer, right? Or, oh, next Christmas, or we just passed Thanksgiving, right? And I'm like, oh, next Thanksgiving, it's going to be fun because we can do X, Y, and Z, or we can, oh, we like this, so we can do this again, right? So I'm talking about the future with her and what I see, right? And that says a lot for a person. It gives them confidence that they can see that future. So I relate that back to this relationship, the coach-client relationship. For us is not only listen to those clues from them, but for you, talk to the future. Like come summertime or come springtime, once we work through this, here's where I see we can start to go with this. And, that might be well past your, quote, 9 sessions, right? But you can start to see maybe they say something about it. Maybe they react to it. Maybe they say like, oh, yeah, I guess. Or maybe, oh, I don't know if we'll still be coaching then. Or, maybe they don't say anything, right? But either way, you're subconsciously and or consciously planting the seed, if you will, of what you see and where you can go with them. And that's valuable. That's important for us to be able to do. So now that I talked about some of those pieces, right, as we get towards the ends, I'll just go with that flow, and then I'll finish up and talk about the language we use along the way, especially at the beginning. But towards the end, as we get to that 9th session, like I said, start talking about it and say, as we get closer to the 9th session, I want you to be thinking about where we can go, where the value is for you in continuing our work. Like I said, letting them know how you feel about it and things like that. And so always on that 9th session, if they haven't told me by that time, right, so I like to know prior to the 9th session whether they're going to continue on or not. That's my goal. And it's not like I'd necessarily specifically say, hey, I want to know, because I don't want to pressure anyone into having to say that. But I usually say it 7th or at least the 8th session, as I say, hey, we're moving on to our 9th session. That's part of the original package. And so now I want to start to think about where we're going to go from there. And so I want you to be able to come to that call knowing where you want to go. Right? So then as I start that call off, I'll say, so I know where we're going today, what we're focusing on. I'm curious, where are you at in terms of continuing our work together? This is the language I say. Where are you at in terms of us continuing our work together? And I just kind of leave it open and see what they say from there. And because I'm like, that's going to determine, where we go today and what we can accomplish. In other words, if we know that this is not the end and we're just going to continue on maybe for another 9 sessions, maybe session by session, whatever it is, we've got more time together, right? So it's a different session, isn't it, than if, oh, I'm stopping after this, I'm going to take a break. By the way, taking a break means they're done. But either way, it's the session goes differently, all right? And I also, if they say, I think I'm going to stop, what I've found is that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to happen. And I want to know that at the beginning of the session versus the end, because then that sets us up for, okay, help me to understand why you feel you want to stop. Not that I'm grilling them or pressuring them to continue. I just want to, that's understandable. Just so I understand, give me an idea of kind of where you're at and what you're thinking. And they tell you, right? I mean, you get a relationship at this point. Let them tell you, right? And then you can say, okay, so where are we going? How do we want to focus with our time today before we go, right? But I've had killer sessions. Those last sessions, those can turn into a killer session. And then I can think of examples, and I know I've had dozens of them over the years where they told me they weren't going to continue on, and then we get to the end of the session, and they're like, you know what? I think I want to do more. I'm like, you think you want to do more, or you want to do more? They're like, I want to do more. I'm like, great. Because they had a killer session, and what that means is they see the value in working with you because you're doing the things that I'm talking about along the way, and you're seeing where the value is. So someone has a last session, and you, even if you think it's a last session because they said this is, I'm going to stop after this, just know you can have a killer session. It doesn't have to be like this closing ceremony where you just kind of talk about all the great things. It's like continue the work, continue to drive forward, find out what's valuable for them, help them out tremendously so that they get to the end of the session with it's hard for them to go away, right? It's like, how can I leave this? This has been so helpful, and it continues to be helpful. And I've even said to people, and I'm like, hey, listen, you know what? I know you told me at the beginning of our call that you were going to stop coaching with me for right now or whatever. But correct me if I'm wrong, that was like a kick-ass session today. Like, or it sounds like, or correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt like you got so much out of our call today. And they're like, oh my God, I did. And I'm like, so with respect to what you want to do, like as your coach, like I just want to sit here and fight for you and say, like, I don't want to let you go. Like I'm just throwing it out there. You know, would you consider talking about maybe instead of just doing it maybe every week or every other week, like maybe doing it like even on a once-a-month basis? Or would you consider, maybe having a session every other week doing 30 minutes at a time? Because I just feel like we've done so much work together, and it's like we still have a session today where it's just like it kicks butt and you're moving forward, and I just would hate to see any of that progress kind of slow down or stop if we were working together, because I know how valuable our time's been. And again, this is me fighting for the client, fighting for the relationship. This isn't a desperate plea like, please hire me, I need the money. And it's not about that at all, right? If you notice where I'm coming from, it's like it's like I'm observing what's going on. And it's just like, I can't help but say, like, that kicked ass. Like, tell me if I'm wrong or not, but it felt like you got tremendous value from this. So it's almost like you're questioning, so do you really want to stop? Because if you do, that's okay. But I'm like, hey, in terms of continuing on, like if you still see value there, then let's talk about, I can be flexible in terms of the frequency and then even the time, but, and I always tell people, like, I don't care how it works, right? If you don't want to buy another 9 sessions, that's okay. Like, we can go session per session. If you want to do every other week and do 30 minutes or once a month 30 minutes, I don't care. All I care is that if I'm helping you move forward and there's value there, then I want to work with you and I want to continue that. And this is the stuff that I'll do with people, and it's all appropriate, and I don't just do it for every single person, right? It's all situational, it's all client dependent, it's all about the value and where they're at, right? But when it's there, I do not shy away from that, and I make it very clear. But also, if you notice, I'm not hard selling someone on something. I'm just talking to, again, if you notice, I'm talking all about what? Value, where the value is. I'm bringing up value and saying, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but that just felt like it was like super valuable kick butt session today. You know what I mean? And then it's just like, I want to continue this with you. So I'm bringing up value. I'm talking about value. I'm clarifying value with them. And because some people, what I've also learned, some people think that because there's 9 sessions, that's all they can do, right? So I've learned this along the way as I started to hear clients say to me, like, oh, next week's our last session. And I'm like, oh, it's our 9th session, so we have to be done. And I'm like, who says we have to be done? They're like, well, you just have 9 sessions with somebody. I'm like, well, it doesn't have to be done. They're like, we don't? I'm like, no. And that's when I started reevaluating my language. And that's what I want to go into now to finish this up is remember earlier when I kind of said, I'm like, oh, the end of our sessions, right? And actually kind of glad I said that now because language matters. So when I'm at, if you will, at the end of the complimentary session, when someone's creating the decision whether to move forward or not, and they told me, yes, Jeff, I want to hire you, right? And I'm presenting my package to them, right? What I'll say is I start you off with 9 sessions, right? So I don't say we have 9 sessions or my package is 9 sessions. I say I start you off with 9 sessions, right? We start off on a week-to-week basis, right? We move organically from there. Usually it lasts 3 to 4 months, right? With all that good stuff right there. And then I'll say, as we get closer to our 9 sessions, we can just determine what works best for you at that point and continuing it on and finding out where the value is there for you or not, right? So that's part of that language that I use initially in that setup is we'll start off with 9 sessions, right? And then even in my welcome letter, you could call it a contract. I call it a welcome letter because it's not real formal. It just kind of outlines some of the things that we can do together and clarifies, here's the number, here's the cost, here's, cancellation policy, things like that. But in terms of the fees of payments, I was so they have it in writing, and I'll say, you've agreed to pay in full by credit card, blah, 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 or whatever it is. and then it says, when it comes time for more sessions, you can continue at that option or let me know what works best for you at that time, right? And a language I use in there as well is we start off with 9 sessions, and then that phrase right there with the fees and the payments, right? And then obviously the language that I went into earlier when I talked about as we're starting to get closer towards the 9th session, and think about where you want to go, how we can continue our work together. That language is very, very important because it's going to start to not only plant seeds, but it's going to let people know that this is just where we begin, right? And just so you know, what that's turned into for me on my end is, as I started to learn this, as I started to say this with people, is what I've realized is that, you know what, people do want to work with you longer. And I don't have exact statistics on, okay, out of every 10 clients, 3 of them continue on with whatever. But I would say on average for me, the majority of people, and I would say like 6 to 7 people out of 10 continue on past the 9 sessions with me. All right, so I start with 9 sessions. The average client that I've worked with does 20 sessions with me. So these are some statistics I can give you. So the average client that I've worked with over the years, and this is mentoring clients, like mentor coaching with, as I help coaches transition to full-time right now. And prior to that, when I did, if you will, just general life coaching, when I've done business coaching outside when I wasn't with coaches per se, just entrepreneurs in general, through the spectrum of all those different clientele in different industries, et cetera, the average person has worked with me for 20 sessions. So just to give you an idea, and if my package is 9, that's just a little bit more than 2 packages, right? And so I've had clients work with me. I have to go back to the exact numbers, but easily over 15 people since 2004 have gone over 100 sessions with me, and I can handfuls of people in the 50s, 60s, 70 sessions, and this is over the course of years. And when you think about it like that, you multiply that by your rate, this is tens of thousands of dollars. I've got 2 people right now that I've been working with just this year. They're on their 3rd package with me. They're into the number 30 sessions with me, going into the 40s, for the next year. So I want to start to give you this, and this is a testament to the stuff I'm talking about. This isn't all theory. This is the stuff I've been doing and tweaking with this language since 2004. Right, and so I want you to realize that when you do this stuff, it's not like it's a technique or whatever. You can call it whatever you want, but again, it's starting to understand how it goes together. And if you notice, it all goes back to selling, right? But this is where people don't understand selling, right? Selling from a pushy standpoint is very different from what I'm talking about here. But really what I'm talking about, this is selling. But it's understanding where that person's at and where the value is for them. And when we understand that, and there's a clear communication between that, if there's still value at that time, they'll continue on, right? And if not, you find a way, and that's where you work with payment plans or you structure from there. Like I said, if I do 30-minute sessions as opposed to an hour, again, I don't do that in the beginning. I never change or modify that in the beginning because, number one, I want to make sure we get paid, ideally pay in full, maybe 2 or 3 payments at the most. I'm willing to be more flexible if it needs to be, but I want to keep it straight in the beginning. Our sessions, I'll be somewhat organic as we go on to it. But in the beginning, I want to keep it pretty strong. But then after we do that 9 sessions, that's when I become a little bit more flexible in terms of when they pay and things like that. I mean, still going to pay as they get the session at least. But I want to accommodate for them because they're a client. I've worked with them. I trust them. I know them. I trust the people from the beginning. But it's someone who's already paid you, who you're already working with, so you get a working relationship. So from there, I want to be as flexible as possible once they've shown me that commitment because I want to make it work for them. And if there's financial situations or time situations or whatever, I want to be able to accommodate that the best I can without compromising anything on my end in terms of getting paid and being able to help them to the best of my abilities as a coach or mentor. I want to be as flexible as possible because, hey, even if I did one more session in the 10th or 11th or 12th session with somebody, that's fantastic because I got to help them that much longer. And I always tell people, too, I'm like, the longer we're able to work together, the more value comes from it because as I start to get to know people, what I've seen is I've seen their trends over time, and the cycles that they go through, the ebbs and flows of their life. Even with seasons just like that, there are certain seasons, and all of a sudden I'll be on the phone, I'll be listening to them, and I'm like, oh, my God. Hold on a second. this sounds like, remember last year, or remember 6 months ago when you came home and you were talking about blah, blah, blah? I'm like, this is a totally different situation, but do you see what's happening here? I'm like, this is no different than that situation. We already worked through this. And they're like, oh my God, you're right, right? So the value of a longer-term client coaching relationship is you get to kind of see and be that barometer of being like, wow, this situation is no different, or like, wow, it seems like every time this happens in your life, this is what happens. This is the way you react. And the great part is you might have already done work around that. You might have already coached them and worked through a strategy. And now, and they realize, like, wow, this might be different circumstantially, but from a fundamental standpoint and strategy of how I get through this, et cetera, it's no different than what we've already done before. And that's when it's really exciting, because then you start to move through things so much quicker and show that strength. And I'll tell you, if you can get to this place with clients, I mean, imagine working 100 sessions with somebody, right? Or 150 sessions with somebody. You know, I've had that opportunity, and it's so exciting where you can get with somebody to the depths you can get with them. So all of this, yes, I want to say it from a business standpoint, so we can get paid, and we can also continue to get paid, because obviously we know if they're nine and done, so to speak, all the time, it's just getting new clients. And as long as we get a good marketing structure and marketing system going, you know, then yeah, we can get new clients, and we can keep that flow going if that's the only source of product that you have right now is coaching, which is fine. But from what's bigger than all that, obviously, and getting paid and things like that, is just being able to help people, right? And be able to be a part of that journey. Like, my big why is beyond even the mentor coaching, is just I want to be a part of people's successes, and people allow me into that space and they trust me. It's fantastic.